Welcome to this session on personal statements. So this forms part of our Year 12 and Year 13 series, and today we're going to be giving you lots of hints and tips on how to write your personal statement and to really set you up for success when applying to university. I'm really pleased to be joined by two students who are currently at university and have quite recently completed a personal statement. So they're going to be sharing their pearls of wisdom on what to include, and we'll also be taking you things like the STAR method and also how to make your application stand out. So we're joined by Sahra from London Metropolitan University. She's going to be talking you through how to make your application stand out. We're also joined by Olivia, who will be talking you through the STAR method. Now, the STAR method is great for personal statements, but it's also really useful for every walk of life beyond university. So when you're applying for jobs and also when you're in an interview, it's a really useful method to help you structure your responses in a really clear way. So before I hand over to Olivia to take you through that all-important STAR method, I'm just going to cover a few things about the personal statement process.
UCAS. UCAS is where you apply to most higher education courses. When submitting your application form through UCAS, the personal statement is the only element where you have the chance to influence the admissions officer who is reading your application form. So this is your chance to explain why you're a great candidate for the course and the university you're applying for. This isn't the time to be shy or humble. It's your one chance to really celebrate yourself, your passion for your subject, and your achievements. It's really important to note that there is a character limit to your personal statement, so make sure that you use concise and clear language all the way through. We'd recommend reading over your personal statement, reading it aloud, and seeing if there are words that you could use that make your language more concise. Applying to universities with the same statement. So when you apply to universities through UCAS, you will submit applications to a number of different universities. The same personal statement is used for every university that you apply for, so it's really important to make sure that it makes sense for everyone that's reading it. What we would recommend is avoiding using things like university names. Read through your personal statement and make sure that it makes sense to a variety of different readers.
So when approaching your personal statement, I think it's recommended to use a nice structure to keep everything in a very chronological order so that the person that's reading it knows exactly what you're talking about and exactly what you gained or achieved from whatever situation you're describing. So one method to do this would be the STAR method, which involves discussing your situation, task, action, and result. So in terms of your situation, that would be the context of what you're discussing. The task would be the task you completed. The action would be what action you took, and the result would be what you learned, gained, or achieved from the situation. So there's an example on the screen to further explain this. And this is basically talking about a lecture that was attended and the things that were learned from this lecture. So it starts off with, for me, values are relative to the collective consensus of what society deems as correct. And the second part, which shows the situation, which is basically the context, is a paragraph discussing the relevance of A-level religious studies and what I have learned and gained from using an example of Jeremy Bentham and his influence on people's beliefs through his ethical system. So it's also important to use examples to explain the points that you make in your personal statement so that it doesn't just seem as though you're just saying a bunch of things but not actually supporting what you're saying. And so the task was a summer school at Bristol University. The action was a lecture called The Deaf Debate by Lois Bibbins. And the result was that I managed to learn the different values that people may give to their own planned deaths and question whether the laws in countries where euthanasia is illegal should be more flexible in complex cases like Diane Pretty's case in 2001 to 2002. So as you can see here, after I've discussed the experience and what I attended, which was the lecture, I also explained what I gained from the situation and used another example as well. And this basically shows that not only do I know what I'm talking about, but I've explained it well enough that the undergraduate admissions person that is reading my personal statement knows that she actually did go to the lecture and she's told me exactly what she's learned and has mentioned things that would actually be important for the course that she's studying, which in this case was sociology.
So how to make your application stand out? So first of all, you must be creative. Admissions teams are not looking for the same recycled example of when I was younger, I wanted to study, ... They are looking for your passion within the personal statement. Also, I'd recommend you read around your subject. For example, for history or a literature-based subject in general, you can read books that may be related to your chosen degree modules. Research and be proactive to really stun the admissions team. You should have a clear structure. Do not focus too much about your extracurriculars and forget about your academic achievements. Those are the most important at the end of the day. There needs to be a greater depth in your academic achievements, and you can use your extracurriculars to show why you're also suited to your subject and also why you have the required skills for your subject as well. Also, explain what you want to gain from the subject. For example, what are your future aims? What do you want to do with your degree? You don't always have to do this, as it is an undergraduate personal statement and they're not expecting you to have your whole life planned, but it will show that you are forward thinking and proactive, which will help your application stand out. You don't need to write too much about your future plans, but just a few lines will be really, really helpful.
Here are my top tips of things that I think would be important when planning and writing your personal statement. The first one would be avoid trying to demonstrate everything you know about the subject and instead write about your opinions and what you've learned. And as you could see from my example with the STAR method, always back up with examples. And I think it's important to include your opinion because we want to know exactly what you think, and in university it's quite expected of us to always demonstrate our opinions in our essays and our work that we produce. So I think that it's also important to highlight that in your personal statement. My second top tip would be highlight your enthusiasm about the subject and eagerness to learn more to prove that the subject is your genuine interest. And I think that it's really important to show genuine interest and make the admissions officer actually think that, okay, this is a subject that you want to study for real, not just for other reasons. And I think being enthusiastic and eager to learn, especially if you don't really have much experience or things to discuss, just show that you're eager to just get into it and, you know, learn along the way. My top tip number 3 would be avoid flowery language and waffling because it wastes characters, especially since the personal statement is not that long when you've actually written it and it's only about a page. So I feel like having a lot of flowery language or trying to sound maybe overly intelligent or overly smart and using loads of big words to maybe impress somebody, it kind of just takes up a lot of characters and doesn't really give us much in terms of value of what you're saying. My top tip number 4 would be do not list anything. Instead, choose a couple of things to discuss in depth. So for instance, what you gain from experience or a book and what this taught you that's relevant to your subject. I would recommend, if you know, especially the university that you're applying to, in the course description, there are often skills that they would like to see or subjects that they would like to see. So I think if you have that in the back of your mind when you're writing your personal statement, make sure you discuss in depth a couple of things that are actually relevant rather than trying to include everything, or say, for example, trying to list every single book that you've read. Maybe it's actually better to pick 1 or 2 and talk about that more in detail and what exactly you gain from that book that's relevant. And my last tip would be make sure you check your spelling, grammar and punctuation, and ensure to keep your writing structured with paragraphs, because I feel like even if you have written a beautiful personal statement, if your spelling is not correct and there's not the right punctuation, or there's no structure and there's no paragraphs, I feel like that would be a big turn off for an undergraduate admissions officer, and they would just be kind of thinking, what's going on here? There's not a lot of structure. So I think it's best to keep it structured and keep it clear so that it reads well and definitely conveys the points that you want to bring.
These are my top tips to really do well on your personal statement. Make sure that you proofread several times, and you need to keep proofreading it until it's perfect. Get your teachers to look over your personal statement and ask them really kindly to mark it for you, and they'll be really willing to do it as long as you ask really nicely. Because this is important, because you may not be able to see your mistakes that you have made, and another person will be able to spot them really quickly. Make sure you don't use overcomplicated language. There is no need to use overcomplicated language, as it will really ruin the flow of your personal statement, and it won't make sense either. Keep it simple and concise. Thirdly, take it slow. Write it in small chunks rather than all in one go. That way you can put more effort into it and it won't look rushed either. Fourthly, read it loudly and read it to your peers and parents if possible. If you read it loudly, you are more likely to spot any mistakes you have made, and if any sentences sound awkward either. Lastly, make sure your personal statement is tailored towards your dedicated course. There is no point in submitting a personal statement that links to, say, sociology when you want to apply for philosophy, for example. It has to really link to the degree course, otherwise admission team might not think that you're right for the degree course and they might just reject you. So just make sure that it is definitely suited towards your subject.
What to include in your personal statement. We know that it can feel quite overwhelming knowing where to start with what to include in your personal statement, but the chances are you have way more experiences to include than you realise. We'd recommend writing a log and making a note of all of your different experiences, and to start writing these down as soon as you can. This will make it easier to recall these things and these experiences when you come to write your personal statement for real. What can you include in your personal statement? Work experience. This may be organised by your school and perhaps something you completed in year 10, or perhaps you've had a part-time job. Think about the skills and qualities that you developed from these experiences and apply them to your university application. Extracurricular activities. So you may have been a member of a sports club or something like a coding club. Again, think about the skills that you gained from these experiences. How do they relate to your chosen course that you're applying to? How do they make you a good candidate for being a good student? We know that this year has been different and that lots of in-person events have been cancelled. This doesn't mean there aren't lots of opportunities out there, and we would recommend things like watching TED Talks and listening to podcasts about your chosen subject. We also know that lots of universities have offered subject tasters or online lectures. If you can attend some of these and talk about these in your personal statement and what you learned, this will show a real passion for your chosen subject. When you're writing things down, remember to use the STAR method to write about your experiences. Read over your example and then ask yourself the question, so what, about each example. What does it show? Does it show the example to demonstrate your suitability for the course? Or does it show your passion for the subject? Or does it show off your skills and abilities that stand you in good stead for further study in higher education? Remember, you only have 4,000 characters to work with, so each sentence is really important and needs to show off your skills and abilities and experiences. So, we hope you found that really helpful and that it's given you inspiration to start that all-important personal statement. In the comments below in the YouTube video, you'll be able to see that there's a link to a worksheet. Now, this is an example of how to structure your personal statements, and it is very similar to the actual process and the actual UCAS form that you'll complete. So it's a really useful exercise for you to do and try at home. So we hope you found that useful and that you do take part in the exercise. Do download that, but we just wish you the very best of luck with your application, and thank you for watching.